us, then they probably won't miss anything too important in the first couple of slides. But first of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us on a Saturday morning for this Rivanna River Corridor Plan Workshop. My name is Sandy Shackelford, and I'm the Director of Transportation and Planning at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. And before we get into the content, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we'll talk about what we're going to cover on today's agenda. So first of all, just so everybody knows, we're going to be recording this webinar, and that also includes any of the typed correspondence in the Q&A. So all participants are going to be automatically muted by us on the technical side. And then you will have two ways to ask questions or raise points for discussion during the presentation. So the first is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A. So you can use that feature to type a question or comment. And then a moderator is going to monitor that section and will respond live if you have a question that we can respond to, or else we'll share your thoughts or comments with the public during the presentation. So you can type, I know it says Q&A, if you have a comment or some sort of point you want to make, you're also welcome to use that feature as well. And then if you would like to speak to the group, you can use the raise hand feature that's located at the bottom of your screen. If you're not on a computer and you're on a phone, you can also dial *9 to raise your hand, and then we will unmute you when we're ready for you to ask the question. You also need to make sure that you're unmuted on your computer. And this feature is located again at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a big microphone. If there's a red diagonal line through it, you're on mute. So click on that to make sure that you are unmuted on your device as well. And then you can ask your question or make your comment. Today's workshop will cover the work that is currently being done by the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County to develop a unified vision and action plan for the future of the urban section of the Rivanna River. The Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission is facilitating this planning effort. Today, I'm joined by a couple colleagues, Nick Morrison, Sharice Franklin, Dominique Laverada, and then Jessica Hirsch-Ballering should be joining us as soon. And these are all PDC planning staff that are working on the project. Nick is helping to run the slides and the presentation. Sharice is going to help moderate. Dominique is joining us to take notes and make sure we capture all of your feedback. As you can see on the agenda for today, we're going to be providing background information on the history of the project and the work that has been completed to date. We will ask for your feedback on some of the information that has already been developed, and we will also be facilitating a discussion about your priorities and concerns for the Rivanna River corridor. We will then make sure that you are aware of the next steps in the plan development and additional opportunities for you to provide your feedback or ask questions. And so it does look like we weren't really sure what to expect as far as attendees. It looks like there is a small enough number of attendees here. So if you have questions, feel free to stop us along the way. We'll do our best to address them. Mostly we want to emphasize, though, that this is an opportunity for us to hear from you in order to incorporate your thoughts, concerns, priorities as we move forward with developing specifically recommendations and implementation strategies for this project. We're also going to do our best to keep things to an hour just to be respectful of your time. So so there will be additional opportunities if you want to think on things and come back. We'll make sure you know how you can continue to provide your thoughts after this. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Nick, and he's going to discuss the project history and background.
Great. Thanks, Sandy. So yeah, before we kind of jump into more of the details, I wanted to just kind of give a high-level overview of kind of the history of the planning process here. So this is a joint effort between both Albemarle County and the City of Charlottesville. And the Rivanna River was identified by both the city and the county as a priority area for collaboration. So dating back, I think, to 2016, a stakeholder group was convened of stakeholders in the area to kind of start looking at what a planning process for this urban stretch of the Rivanna River would look like. So those conversations were held for about a year between 2016 and 2017, and they came up with this phased approach. So starting with phase one that began in the the spring of 2017, or the fall of 2017 rather. And that was a $30,000 joint project to look specifically at existing conditions along the corridor. So we held monthly meetings with a technical group to start kind of building that baseline data to try and inventory that. And that project lasted until 2018, and we presented that at the Flow River Fest in September of 2018, that existing conditions report. And part of that first phase was then to tee up a subsequent phase in phase 2, which we're currently in, which is the visioning phase. So looking more specifically at what are the community needs and wants, and then how do you start building in some of those recommendations to then achieve that. So kind of building on the work that was done in the first phase of the existing conditions and then building upon that. There had been scoped a subsequent phase, which would be phase 3, which would take the visioning phase and then start putting actionable, implementable recommendations to things that were identified in phase 2 and developing a more robust master plan for the urban corridor. So that has not been approved. Where, if that phase were to occur, that would be determined at a future date. But right now we're in phase 2. So the phase 2 study area was defined by the technical committee, and it runs from Penn Park at the northern terminus down to I-64 to the south, and then incorporates parcels and property along that stretch of the urban Rivanna corridor. In the first phase, we had a much larger, broader study area that ran from the South Fork Reservoir down to Milton Road Bridge near Shadwell. So a much larger study area. It was more generalized. So we just did a half-mile buffer from the center line of the river. And that was just to start kind of gathering again those existing conditions. But in this phase, it was decided by the technical committee and others that it would be more beneficial to have a more targeted area, which is what we created. So in the second phase, we've done a number of different data collection points and solicitation of feedback from the community. So the first kind of effort we've done was to refine some of the mapping efforts that we did in the first phase, and then based on some needs that were identified, start inventorying and mapping some additional points of interest. So we've done that. We've done a number of surveys. So we launched the first phase of the survey in fall of 2019, where we tabled at the Flow River Fest. And then we also launched an online survey just to start gathering what the community's priorities were for this corridor. We also, in a subsequent surveying phase, we wanted to get feedback on the vision statement and guiding principles, which we'll go into further here in this workshop. This is the first of a number of workshops that we'll be holding. We've also opened up public comment on the project website, which is at the tjpdc.org website. And so we've had a number of comments come through that way. Our staff has also been doing some benchmarking work with other communities that have kind of similar characteristics to what's found along our river and what they've done in terms of their planning efforts. And then we're also going to conduct a couple of stakeholder group interviews with communities and groups that have been identified to participate in this effort. So just kind of a quick overview of the timeline of phase 2. We kicked it off in July of 2019, and through July and kind of that early part of 2019, we started refining the study area that was defined by the technical group. We tabled at the Flow River Fest. In the fall of 2019, we came back and started adding some more data to the maps and then summarizing some of the survey data that we had received. In December of 2019, we started to develop a targeted business outreach strategy. And then starting in January, kind of discussing those targeted outreach efforts. Obviously, COVID kind of threw a wrench into those plans. So that kind of disturbed the timeline a bit. It's something you can't really plan for, but I think we're back on track. Through the spring and early summer, staff worked to develop the vision and guiding principles, finalizing that final outreach strategy, and where we are now is doing the community outreach and peer benchmarking. Moving towards kind of the end of 2020, we will start drafting the final plan and then get that out there for public review, edits and revision around that timeline. And then just to hit kind of the high points of the mapping, these are all available online, and I can send in the Q&A box the link to all of these. They just don't necessarily fit within a PowerPoint, so it's a little hard to manipulate them in here. But just to give a high level overview, the first map was looking at kind of future opportunities along the corridor. So city and county staff provided notations on certain things that they had heard from the community that they knew were either in the development pipeline, just certain projects, things like that. So that's the first map. We have a trails and parks and recreation features map that shows existing and proposed bike and pedestrian infrastructure along with parklands, trails, boat launches, and then kiosk locations. We have a really simplified future land use map that's just pulling general future land use designation from the county's PANTOPS master plan process and then also the city's comprehensive plan. And then we have kind of an environmental look at what the existing floodplains are and then overlaid trails and public land so you can see kind of where those intersect. And then we also have just a basic land cover map that looks at what's actually on the ground. So impervious surfaces, tree covers, things like that. And then the final one is just a satellite imagery map just so people can get kind of a lay of the land. So again, I'll put in the chat box the link to those maps so that way folks can review those in detail and comment specifically on those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charisse and allow her to kind of talk through some of the feedback that we've heard so far. So Charisse.
Hi, thanks, Nick. As Nick said that we originally did a survey at the Flow Fest in 2019, sorry. And the feedback that we got, we looked at that feedback with the online survey because they were the same questions we asked to see if people still felt the same way. So what you're seeing on your screen now is the feedback we got from in-person Flow Fest, and everything has pretty much stayed the same, but I'll go through it and sort of highlight any differences in what we've been hearing. Thus far from the online survey, there have been 102 responses. And I believe at Flow Fest, we got about 120 around their responses. So for describe how you primarily use the river corridor, that pretty much stayed the same. People got a little bit more specific as far as how they use, what water activities they use, or how they use the waterfront of the river. And kayaking, tubing, floating, and swimming were the things that sort of rose to the top for that. Dog walking was something that was new since the last survey, and bird watching. But the walking and the running and the jogging and the biking, that stayed true, and using the paths in that way. What aspects of the river corridor are most important to you? That did not change. Safety sort of kind of rose to the top with that, though. There was more of an emphasis on safety in the online survey, but remaining environmentally friendly and staying mainly litter free was also main points. Where does development or redevelopment seem most appropriate? No development was a resounding response with that one, but there were a few other responses on the online survey at pedestrian and bike bridge crossings and near Free Bridge. So the next question, is it important to you to learn about access along the river corridor? Did I skip one? No, I didn't. Yes, that stayed the same. People said yes, and for the following question, is it important to you to learn about ecology along the corridor? That was a resounding yes as well. And for the write-in responses, we got a plethora. It was a lot more array of responses. Address traffic congestion on 250, still was there. Enhance recreational opportunities with low impact on habitat, that was also there. But do not expand the parking lot was something that was kind of a recurring theme. Consider public transit options to the river. I saw that quite a few times. Better connectivity, bike, pedestrian bridges, and more access points were some of the write-in comments for that. And a few people wrote, because of the pandemic, there has been an increased activity along the river corridor. And a few people had concerns about thinking about, with increased activity, how are we going to protect that natural ecosystem? And next slide, Nick. Okay. And we actually did do a survey asking about the vision statement and the guiding principles. And thus far, 55 people have answered that. I'm not sure if Sandy's going to speak in detail about that vision statement, but I just wanted to let you know that there is a survey online right now, and most people have agreed with our vision statement and guiding principles of the 55 people who've answered it.
Thanks, Charisse. And you all can let us know if you also agree with them or not in just a minute. But what we did to develop the vision statement was we took all that feedback that we got from the first round of public outreach at the Flow Festival, along with the other initiatives and planning efforts that were being conducted by the city of Charlottesville and the county of Albemarle. And the technical committee went back and forth doing several iterations to create this draft of a vision statement. And then we also vetted this with the steering committee for the Rivanna River Corridor Plan and made some additional revisions based on feedback that we got from the steering committee. So the vision statement that has been developed right now is what you see on your screen. The Rivanna River flowing through Charlottesville and Albemarle County is one of the community's greatest assets. In and near Freebridge, Woolen Mills, and the Pantops area, the river corridor is and will continue to be a vibrant place where people experience a quiet and serene natural environment, enjoy healthy outdoor activities and venues, and appreciate important historic and cultural points of interest. So obviously we worked really hard to make sure that this was capturing what our best understanding was for what the public wanted for out of the Rivanna River as it continues to develop into the future. So what we want to know now is, in addition to the information we're collecting online, we just want to give you all a chance to let us know, have we gotten this right, or do we need to go back, and are there any other additional revisions that we need to make? So I'm going to ask Nick to launch the vision statement poll, and you all we'll give you I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And we just want you to tell us generally, do you agree or disagree? And so we'll try about 30 seconds. And Nick, you can let us know if we need a little bit more time. Maybe about another 10 seconds or so. All right.
So I'll share the results.
Okay, so we have a couple people disagreeing. So let's just go ahead and take a minute. If anybody, especially if there's something that you think that needs to be revised in the vision statement, we'd love to hear from you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to give you a second if you have some thoughts that you want us to discuss on the session today. We'll go ahead and make a little time for that right now. So again, you can either type a response in that Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and we'll give you a chance to speak if you'd like to do that.
Okay, so
you're muted, Charisse.
So we have Peter Krebs, who has raised his hand and would like to talk. So turn it over to Peter.
Hey there. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Sandy and Charisse and everybody. Actually, I think your vision statement is really close. My only objection to it is the inclusion of the word quiet, which I don't think it's necessary, but what it does is it allows folks who have a very specific way that they like to use the river to exclude other people who experience the river in different ways. So for example, the Rivanna River Company has an annual party on the river. Is that contrary to the vision? That's my only comment.
Do you want a response, or do you just want us to document?
That's simply a rhetorical thing. Just document it. You don't have to respond.
Great, thank you.
And I also like to read, Anne had a comment, Anne Malik, in the question and answer. In the feedback was mentioned that development should not occur if damage to the ecosystem would result. That prioritization is important, that the natural system protection is a priority over development.
Great.
We've got, let's see, another hand raised. So we've got Lydia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, yes.
Okay, so I'm also very worried about like pieces of wildlife that we still have near the Rivanna River. And especially as you noted, as you mentioned about bird watching, and I live next to Darden Park, and I can see that Darden Park is just fields of concrete for parking lots, and you already noticed that people don't want to increase this, and lawns that are not used and just consume money to smooth it. And I would be really very disappointed if this Rivanna River corridor will turn into driving roads for cars to parking lot and smooth lawns without any kind of pieces of wild life. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
I don't see any more hand raised.
Nope.
And nothing else in the Q&A box, but.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the guiding principles then, and this might help address additionally some of those other concerns that you all raised. But we developed, there actually needs to be another wedge added into this to include public safety, but we basically broke out, going from the vision statement, looking at where the main themes were that we wanted to focus on developing strategies and recommendations. We were able to categorize the main areas that we wanted to focus on into what we're calling guiding principles. So we started out by saying that we were going to have these 6 or 7 guiding principles that were going to guide the rest of the plan development. And out of all of those, we weren't going to prioritize any of them. So this wasn't going to be a conservation plan. This wasn't going to be a recreation plan. This was going to be a plan that really strove to balance all of those different factors. What happened during the steering committee discussion, though, is that the steering committee made it really clear that the environmental and ecological protection of the river needed to be the highest level of consideration. So we can allow some of these other activities to occur within the river. We can allow things like economic development to a certain scale. We can allow things like developing a more robust trail system with better connections. But they all needed to be contained first and foremost by looking at the environmental impacts on the river and making sure that we are protecting the environment first and foremost. So what we ended up doing was we changed the diagram to pull the environmental protection out of being one of the wedges and made that the big ring around the entire circle. So that before we consider anything else, first and foremost, we have to consider the environmental impacts. So Nick, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So these are the guiding principles that came out of that discussion, and maybe this will address some of those areas of concern that you all mentioned. We might need to still do a little bit of tweaking though, so we're definitely taking those into consideration, but this might provide some additional context. So again, all of these, except for environmental protection, are considered to be of equal priority, with environmental protection being the highest concern and priority for the future development of the river. Environmental protection of the riparian system shall be paramount in all activities and land uses in the river. Recreational activities along the waterfront will be enhanced and will also encourage and promote commercial recreation. So things like what the Rivanna River Company is already doing. Landscape and buffering of existing commercial and industrial activities will enhance the natural experience of being on and along the river. New development and redevelopment will contribute to a mixture of use. So you can see there are several uses that are already cited along the river. Those will be allowed to continue. But it will also result in or complement recreational activities along the river corridor while protecting key environmental and historic features. So again, there's that emphasis on the balance. Historic places and cultural features will be protected, identified, and incorporated into the greenway and park system. Multi-purpose trails and bridges will offer pedestrians and bicyclists opportunities for movement to, through, and within the river corridor. So we're looking at those connections with the trails. We're also looking at how expanding opportunities for people to be able to access the park and make connections to the park from roads and the larger transportation system. And then also public safety measures were added as one of the guiding principles to maximize the safety and enjoyability of using the trails and ensure that undeveloped natural areas along the river are not misused. So that was what we developed. That goes into a little bit more detail than we could in just the vision statement. So we're going to do the same thing, Nick, if you would like to launch the poll. We'll give you a little bit longer for this one, but we're going to ask you just the same questions. Go through each of these points. Do you agree or do you disagree with the prioritization and what these guiding principles are steering us towards as far as plan recommendations? This might take you a little bit longer. We'll give you, maybe we'll start with a minute and see how that goes.
So we're at the minute mark. We've got 2 that have responded, so we'll keep it open for a little bit longer, and maybe at the 1.5 minute mark, we'll close.
A lot of questions to get through.
Okay, I'm gonna close the polling. Oh, got a couple more coming in.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. Share the results.
Okay. So it looks like environmental protection, everybody was on board with that. So that's good. There was a little bit of more disagreement with the recreational activities, new development and redevelopment, and the trails. So let's focus on those where there's some disagreement, a little bit more disagreement. If anybody would like to provide comment on why you disagreed with some of those, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share those thoughts at this time. So again, you can either use the Q&A box to type a response, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you if you'd like to speak. And again, if you're on a phone, you can also use *9 to let us know that you'd like to speak.
Kat Emhoff has her hand up.
Great.
All right, Kat, I think you're unmuted, so you should be.
There we go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of commercial use of the river, all of it's always a sense of scale. We've seen places kind of love their water resources to death. So I do think there always has to be a concept of what is the carrying capacity for the resource. So you can overdevelop recreationally. I've seen that out west. So again, I think it's not a yes or no, it's a how much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Don't see anything in the Q&A box. Let's see.
Peter Krebs
And so
Peter, would like to comment. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. I actually didn't disagree with any of your principles. I think they're all good. One thing that I find doing this work, and maybe Anne or somebody that is even more on the front lines than I am about this could weigh in, but environmental protection in a case like this isn't only a question of like setting aside and making sure that stuff is protected. It's also a case of thinking in advance about stewardship and laying the groundwork to make maintenance really feasible and easy. So I would almost modify your first principle to protection and stewardship, so we can be proactive about during design processes, making it so we can keep the resource be really sustainable over the long period. Lots of people commenting about litter and stuff, and there's some things we can do on the design side as well as like the enforcement side for that.
Thanks, Peter. We have a couple of comments. Bev Catlin says, use of scale was an issue this summer at Riverview Park, especially on weekends. And then we have Robin Haynes weighing in saying, commercial development is a contradiction to environmental attraction. Redeveloping what already exists along the river could help though.
Great. See, are there any other, before we move on, are there any other comments specifically on the guiding principles that you all want to make sure are noted? Okay. All right, well, let's go on to the next slide then.
Yes, we have another question
okay.
answer from
Okay.
Ann Malik. Just want to read that, get that in. I disagree with the principle about organized recreation because it is without boundary. It could be made clear in each principle that environmental degradation will not occur, not allow destruction and replacement. That organized recreation not overpower the ability of individuals and more quiet users from their enjoyment. A group of birders experience is overwhelmed by a group of mountain bikers, by example.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Anne, for that consideration.
All right. And you can certainly continue to bring up thoughts as we go through the rest of this discussion, but really what we wanted the bulk of this presentation to be would be, first of all, to get your feedback to know what other perspectives do we need to make sure that we're considering as we go through creating some of these foundational principles. But then also at the larger plan to make sure that we are considering the interests of the entire community who use and value the river in different ways. And so for those of you that received the mailing notifying you of this webinar, you already received these questions ahead of time, and maybe you've been thinking about them a little bit. But this is really the opportunity for you to share with us what your concerns and priorities are for the river. Specifically, we suggested, since this went out to folks who own properties and have invested in businesses in the river corridor area, we especially want to focus some of the discussion on what those impacts would be for you and what you want us to know about your needs and desires for the river. But also any discussions can go beyond these questions as well, and just letting us know what you care about or what you think maybe hasn't been addressed yet that you want to see addressed. So the thoughts that we wanted to start out with were, what are your thoughts and suggestions on balancing growth and redevelopment along the river with environmental protection? We're clearly seeing that's very important to a lot of people, so we'd love to hear more from you on that. What would you like to see within the corridor that is currently missing, and what do you want to make sure is protected and maintained? And what would a successful river corridor plan to do for you as a business or property owner? again, this is your time just to let us know what your thoughts are. So we're hoping we can just spend that time listening to what you all have to say. If you don't want to share publicly, you're also welcome to either email me at that email address at the bottom of your screen, or you can go to our website and you can fill out the comment form as well.
So we've got a couple of folks raising their hands, so let me just open that up. Let's see. I think Lydia and both Kat should be able to unmute themselves and ask their questions or provide their comments and discussion. So
hello again. As I said, that I live on Pantops, so I will be like able to talk about this part of the corridor. So there is a car road next to the river, and if we're talking about safety, it creates a lot of unsafety because there is very tiny pedestrian sidewalk, and especially now during pandemic, it's not enough like space for people to walk and run. And I'm not talking about biking. This part of the river, it doubles already. So if you close it, you have access from other roads, and moreover, when it goes to the highway, it can turn only to the right, only in one direction. So from my point of view, when I run along this corridor, it's really big on safety. So I run, there are cars that drive fast, and I cannot see how this question can be solved other than destroying more wild like land and just putting more concrete, especially for cars. The second question is that there is Darden Park, and there is a lot of space for, I think, commercial part. And for example, there was discussion about one more dog park, again, playground. Again, so I think that if you can kind of use what is already there, like Darden Park, to create activity and point of attraction, it would be nice if you can do it there, because now, from my point of view, it's really a lot of land just useless. No one uses it, it just consumes money to move lawns. Yeah, I would say that's it from my side. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
We have Kat.
Yeah, I'd love to know what has been done or thought about or discussed so far, just in terms of habitat improvement. I've been on the river since the 70s, and of course, I've seen a lot more sediment fill in parts of the Rivanna, and the quality of the habitat, especially seeing a lot more invasive species. And I'm just wondering, both with kind of habitat planning, stewardship, and also water quality monitoring, how that fits into the overall conversation about environmental protection.
Just to touch on that really briefly, I think that's something that we need to discuss as far as what those recommendations will look like specifically for the plan. The Rivanna Conservation Alliance is already doing a lot of that work, so some of those recommendations might be partnering with them. But I have been getting a lot of emails through our website about specifically invasive species and habitat rehabilitation. So it's definitely going to make its way into the plan. To be addressed. Yeah, I see Dan has his hand raised, Dan Mahan from Albemarle County, so he may want to address that a little bit more specifically.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, to Kat's question, one thing, if you look at the river corridor on both sides, much of it is held as parkland by either the city or the county. And one thing that has been slowly evolving and emerging with both of our park systems is a sense of staff as stewards. Instead of just maintainers, we're looking for staffing that are interested, passionate, and stewards. which is very different than the way the parks have been maintained in the past. The other thing is the role, we recognize the really important role for volunteers and ways of mobilizing volunteers, empowering them and educating them and guiding them to be more active along the river. And I just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, it's a dynamic landscape that is ever evolving, ever changing, and ever being compromised. I'm sitting here at Dardentown Park right now up on the bluff looking down and remembering the floods I've seen where this whole area is just totally underwater. And that's a big important part to consider when looking at this landscape. That's all I got. Hello?
There was an email that came in that I just want to respond to, where there was a question about representation of the Monacan Indian Nation of Virginia being represented in this plan. We have not reached out yet, but I've been in touch with Dan, and those are one of the, if you go back to that first slide or where we talked about the data collection, that is one of the groups that we want to make sure that we sit down and talk through the plan recommendations with, and make sure that we do incorporate those interests and concerns as we think through what this planning effort is going to look like. So thank you for bringing that up. It's really important. And
if I could comment real quickly on that. Mm-hmm. Am I still on?
Yep.
Yeah. This whole urban corridor is rich in local history, and there are so many stories that we can actually tell that sort of point to the roots and the foundation of why this is even a town. The story can be told along this river in various narratives, and it's kind of what I see is the icing on the cake. But to bring people to the river and not just enjoy it for getting your cardiac pumping and everything, but also just to get a quiet sense of the past that was here. And we're working with some ideas with the Monacan community and the African American community. There's just so much more that can be told and done here. Yeah.
We've got a couple of comments coming in. The first one from Carsbrook. I would like to have a brewery tied into a multi-purpose trail along the river, auto towing businesses along High Street, similar to the New Belgium Brewery in Asheville, North Carolina. We've got Diane, who, let's see, she rode with Dan to the Visit on the Monacan Community and just given a shout out. And then from Peter, he's to what Dan says, so glad to hear about the stewardship credo. One other subtle thing the county does at Dardentown is providing different spaces for different ways people use the park. Love to see that commitment echoed throughout the corridor. So thanks, everybody.
We're getting some really good feedback. Does anybody else want to add additional thoughts? Or we do have some staff here as well. If you want to continue to ask questions, we have some very knowledgeable folks here as well that can respond to some of those. But anything else you want to make sure we're thinking about?
David has his hand raised.
Sure.
Let's see.
Go ahead, David, whenever you're ready.
Oh, gotta allow him to talk. All right, I think you should be able to unmute now, David.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you. Just wanted to follow up on Kat's comment about stormwater management and runoff issues. I think at this stage, we're certainly going to recognize that's something that needs to be evaluated. If new development and redevelopment guiding principle has the expectation for also protecting key environmental features, that may be part of phase 3, but I certainly think that we need to evaluate how our regulations work in terms of allowing runoff and stormwater management adjacent to the corridor. So that will be something we'll be looking into. That's it.
Thank you, David. We have another question. Carsbrook wants to know, how is the Northtown Trail progressing? And Anyone offer any insight into that?
Well, could you repeat that?
How is the North Town Trail progressing?
Am I still unmuted?
Mhm.
Okay. Dan, I guess Dan and I can respond to that because we're taking a couple of approaches. The trail concept called for in part a trail concept along the Rivanna River to a strategic point near the North Fork in 29 Hollymead area, in which it would continue up into Hollymead. Dan and Parks and Rec, I know, are anxiously working on completing those pieces as they can. We have a recent park that was established, is in the process of being established on 29 North. That's sort of a piece to that. The other approach we're taking is also to ensure that the intent of the Northtown Trail connecting Hollymead to downtown through our urban area also has a more of an urban commuter type option. So the trails along bike lanes along Berkmar Drive Extended have been provided. We have a grant to continue at Berkmar Drive bike lane from the Hilton Heights Road traffic circle down to Rio Road. It's a key feature of our small area plan. And we are in the process of pursuing through our multiple efforts, including a Rio Road corridor study evaluating continuing the John Warden Parkway Trail up the Rio Road corridor to connect into our 29 North, Rio 29 area. So there's sort of an urban and rural approach. I don't know, Dan, if you want to touch on moving up along the Rivanna River component of that.
Yeah.
But we are making a conscious effort, given the budget constraints and grant opportunities, to pursue that interconnectivity from Hollymead to downtown.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to what David said. It was covered it pretty well, but you know, we're constantly looking along all these corridors, the whole river corridor, and it's really because there's no contiguous property that we can work with. It's sort of an inch by inch thing. If any opportunities, anything comes up along the corridor, you know, we're seeking to knit it all together. So there are significant pieces. I think Belvedere was recently a pretty big piece. We've got some challenges. We've recently finished feasibility study for the South Fork that should be available to the public. And there's a lot of obstacles, but we're just, you know, focusing in that along the whole corridor. The one thing, the significant piece to the new park, the boat launch, is that it opens up the river trail in a great way. And if you haven't been on the river from up there down, it's really remarkable. But yeah, we're keeping an eye on it, and wherever we can, we're contributing and putting it together. That's about all I can say, I think.
Thanks, Dan. We have
Yeah.
another comment from Diane Brown Towns. Will any of the Pantops car dealerships be relocating? They fit the era of the 60s. It's just too much congestion as other businesses continue to develop along 250 East. I'm not sure if Diane had another question she was preparing for.
Well, I can respond that we're not aware of any other relocations at this point in time, but the industry is at a point probably where it's going to be changing in terms of types of cars and types of sales and number of car sales being sold. So I would imagine there will be change in the future. We're not aware of any change or relocation at this point in time in Pantops, though.
Are there any other questions or feedback you want to provide at this time? Great. Well, we'll go ahead and move forward to the next slide then. There is one very specific project that we're working on that is related to this, and I'm going to let Jessica take over and describe that.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? This is just an announcement for another public workshop for a potential project that, if it moves forward, would be taking place within the Rivanna corridor that you guys have been talking about. So about a year and a half ago, at the request of staff from the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, VDOT's Transportation, Mobility, and Planning Division hired consultants to complete a feasibility study to develop a conceptual plan and planning level cost estimate for a bike and pedestrian connection across the Rivanna River. And on the right, you can see the study area that the consultants worked on. It was mostly centered around the Riverview Park area. Go to the next slide. So that public workshop is going to take place on Thursday, November 12th at 6 p.m. It's going to be a virtual webinar just like this one. This is our planned agenda. We will review the precedent plans and public engagement that's happened to date for this potential project. We will talk about the feasibility study goals, what the consultants went into their feasibility study looking for, and the feasibility study results, which mostly center on engineering, project connectivity, permitting concerns, cost estimates, and then some example projects so you can see what they were thinking of. And then finally, we'll go into next steps, what the project would look like if it were to move forward. On the right, you can see a list of just the tentative questions we will be asking the public, the kinds of information we will be looking for the public to provide about their opinions. And next slide. And this is just a reminder of the actual public workshop time. Like I said, it'll be November 12th from 6 to 7 p.m. and it'll be a virtual workshop. You will not need to register for that event, but the Zoom information will be on our website. That's it.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Jessica. So we will get that information on the website. We'd like to encourage those of you who are specifically interested in the trails and that facility to attend that. So just as far as you know, that mostly wraps up what we were trying to accomplish with the webinar today. So we really appreciate, again, you guys joining us this morning and providing your thoughts and your feedback. And we'll be doing this again on Thursday evening. So if you know anybody that wasn't able to make it on this call but is still interested, you can encourage them to join us then. But as far as next steps, we're going to continue to accept public comments and feedback online until November 30th. Again, you can complete the surveys or the responses to the poll, the survey. They're both surveys, I guess. The second one is more like the poll where you can provide feedback on the recommendations and the vision statement and the guiding principles. We're also going to be reaching out to other stakeholders groups, like we mentioned earlier. We'll continue to work on the benchmarking, and then we'll continue to focus on that bike and pedestrian crossing feasibility study and getting public feedback on that as well. And if you want to advance to the next slide, Nick. So all of our contact information is available there. All the information that has been completed so far is on our project website. There's also a comment form. So if you want to provide feedback and one of the surveys will not give you the right opportunity, just put your comments into that comment form. I'm keeping all of those and we'll organize them, and we'll definitely be incorporating that feedback into our plan development. We would love to get your comments before November 30th. If you have thoughts, we'd love to receive those prior to that date, but we'll go ahead and keep the portal open and the opportunities open until then. This recording is going to be posted online after probably the webinar on the 29th. We'll post the recording online. So anybody who missed it, or if you want to go back and look at it, that will be available as well. And then otherwise, I just want to thank Nick, Sharice, Jessica, and Dominique for putting all of this together. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day today.
And one comment from Peter who said that he loved the signs in the park. He would just suggest hanging flyers for the next webinar and that he can assist if we need to do that. And then Diane asked, will any of the Pantops car dealerships be relocating? I think we answered that one.
Yep,
David did, so.
We'll be in touch, Peter. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.